Ia tātou e kōkiri nei I tēnei kaupapa, ka waipoketia nei ngā whakaaro e rātou mā e te iwi o parihitini. E tau kume nei I te oranga tonutanga mō rātou. Nō reira e te au māngea kia rere, ko ngā tau whirotanga o te wāhi ngaro kia koutou. Kia ora and welcome to Te Ao with Moana. Last week, as we commemorated Anzac Day, I couldn't help but think of all the wars and armed conflicts currently taking place around the world. Front and centre is Gaza. For 6 months now, we've watched events unfold in absolute horror after Hamas militants broke out and killed over 1,000 Israeli civilians, foreign nationals and military personnel, and took around 250 hostages. And the scale of Israel's response, the mass bombardment, the ground invasion, the displacement and terrorising of an entire population, it sparked international outrage and concern, including from our own.
The situation in Gaza is an utter catastrophe. New Zealand condemns Hamas for its heinous terrorist attacks on 7 October. Palestinian civilians continue to bear the brunt of Israel's military actions. Gaza, which was already facing huge challenges from this conflict, is now a wasteland.
And still, the devastation continues. That wasteland Winston Peters described: mosques, churches, schools, universities, hospitals, damaged, destroyed. Then there's the human catastrophe, people wintering in tents, half of the 2 million plus population displaced, many, according to some reports, teetering on the edge of famine. Over 34,000 lives lost, according to the Palestinian health officials, all paying the price of Israel's stated goal of defeating Hamas and bringing the hostages home. And that's just in the Gaza Strip. Across in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, at least 468 Palestinians have reportedly also been killed since the war began.
Settlers know that they can get away with doing it. They are armed by the Israeli government. They are sometimes directly encouraged to carry out attacks, and they're doing so in more and more areas that the Israeli government covets for settlements.
Israel claims the right of self-defense.
It's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It's not true. This rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved, it's absolutely not true.
אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם.
Very puzzled by the constant concern which the world is showing for the Palestinian people and is actually showing for these horrible, inhuman animals who have done the worst atrocities that this century has seen.
Not everyone buys the self-defense argument.
Israel cannot claim the right of self-defense against a threat that emanates from the territory it occupies.
Still, Israel is not backing down over the war. In the face of all of that, it can be difficult to understand what's happening and why, especially for us so far away. South Africa has taken Israel to the International Court of Justice, accusing it of carrying out genocide on the people of Gaza. The ICJ ruled genocide was plausible, a charge Israel, unsurprisingly, rejects.
The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it.
And these past weeks, the entire world has been on edge. First, when Israel struck an Iranian embassy compound in Syria, killing, amongst others, high-ranking military officials. Then this happened. Waves of Iranian drones and missiles directed at Israel, though mostly intercepted and causing little damage. But it was this, the killing of international aid workers in Gaza by Israeli missiles, that re-energized international outrage about the war.
Now, the deaths of 7 aid workers in Gaza has sparked international outrage and brought an apology from Israel over what it's calling, in its words, a grave mistake.
It's been an increasingly difficult balance for the Biden administration. On one hand, warning Israel of heavy-handedness in Gaza, and on the other,
I told Prime Minister Netanyahu, our commitment to Israel's security against these threats from Iran and its proxies is ironclad. Let me say it again, ironclad. We're going to do all we can to protect Israel's security.
Washington gives around $3.3 billion a year to Israel to buy American military equipment and services. The US support was topped up by another $17 billion this month. And less than 2 weeks ago, 12 member states supported a resolution for the state of Palestine to be admitted as a full member to the United Nations.
I salute you in the name of the Palestinian people and their leadership.
The resolution failed. The United States was the only member to veto.
Those against?
But it's the disproportionate scale of retaliation and collective punishment of all Palestinians that's seen a shift in the international mood, not least on US campuses. Student protests demanding universities divest from Israeli enterprises comes on the back of worldwide protests.
From Massachusetts to Michigan to California.
We're fighting against the complicity of our own university and the hand that this university has, and at the end of the day, we're anti-war.
Francesca Albanese, international lawyer, researcher, author, and the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied territories, was here in Aotearoa recently. Her message was all about rehumanizing, as she called it, the conversation. She also said that the fuse was lit well before this latest escalation on October the 7th.
The situation didn't start on the 7th of October, and Palestinian human rights organizations and an increasing number of Israelis themselves have recognized the situation prior to the 7th of October was untenable, was unbearable, because the level of oppression and indignity and humiliation that the Palestinians were under sooner or later would explode.
But the war has gone to another level.
There is a new level of ferocity unleashed particularly against the Palestinian people following the ferocity of Hamas acts against Israeli civilians. There is no way to justify or condone what Hamas has done. At the bottom of it, there is the need for two people who live in the land to have basic rights, freedom and dignity. And this is not possible because basically there are 4 million Palestinians who have been under martial rule for 56 years. I understand that people outside of the region might think that there is Israel on one side and the Palestinian Authority on the other side, but Israel controls de jure or de facto the life of all Palestinians under occupation. So this is the situation the Palestinians face, and the Gaza Strip has been under an unlawful blockade since 2007. And so the colonization has grown, and apartheid regime is the backbone, the legal backbone of this system.
After the break, we stay with Gaza and hear from one Jewish woman whose stand attracted the attention of the Israeli government. Welcome back. In the war of words over events in Gaza, you could be left thinking that all Israelis, and by extension Jewish people everywhere, support what the Israeli government is doing. They don't, of course. And one who doesn't is South African-born union organiser Justine Sachs.
I was proud to see Winston Peters make such a strong statement and call for a ceasefire. I think, again, that reflects our values. Since really the beginning, the majority of Aotearoa has supported a ceasefire, and that hasn't always been reflected politically.
How would you characterise the situation in Palestine?
I know, that's currently being investigated by the ICJ and will be a matter of debate, but as far as I'm concerned, I think Israel's actions in the Gaza Strip have been genocidal.
It was South Africa who accused Israel of genocide at the International Court of Justice. Israel refutes it.
Anyone with any sense, any moral clarity can see what Israel is doing is so wrong and understands that in this scenario, Israel is Goliath and Palestine is David, okay? There is an oppressed and oppressor in this scenario, and the onus is on the oppressor. The onus is on the oppressor. So, to call critics of that anti-Semitic is dangerous. I think it puts my community in danger, actually.
Anti-Semitism represents prejudice and hatred towards Jews, but it's a term many say has been weaponised against those who criticise the state of Israel, even Jewish people.
I can't imagine any other scenario where a country is a protected entity, and it is, it's a form of racism to criticize a country. It's so absurd to, as I said, that allegation has no merits, and how do I deal with it? I think people increasingly see that for what it is.
Then there's Zionism, the belief that Judaism represents both a nationality and religion.
Zionism is the idea that there has to be a Jewish majority, and so on that basis, other citizens are made to be second-class citizens. I think it's a very reactionary and quite violent colonial idea.
So can you just break it down a little bit for us? What does being Jewish mean? What is that?
I think a lot of time people do get a little bit confused by that because they think Judaism is a religion. I'm a bit of an atheist Jew, so I would have to dispute that. I'm no less Jewish because I'm not, I'm not religious. It's like sort of multifaceted, I would suppose. So yeah, it's an ethnic, cultural identity as well as a religion. It's fraught, but I think most identities are. It's beautiful as well. It's got it's thousands of years old. So we've got a rich tapestry of traditions and cultural rituals and holidays and things like that. And I think, it's, for me, I can distinguish between that very ancient tradition and culture and the modern Israeli state.
7 years ago, when superstar Lord, yes, our very own Lord, was scheduled to play a concert in Tel Aviv, Justine and her friend Nadia Abu Shanab urged the musician to make a stand against the occupation and boycott.
We never thought we'd get a response. A few days after the piece was published, she cancelled her concert in Israel. And that was an amazing moment. Pop stars joining the fight for justice and freedom. It was awesome.
Every night I live and die, need somebody take them home.
A couple of weeks later, Justine and Nadia hit the headlines. 3 Israeli teenagers claimed emotional distress and artistic harm caused by the cancellation. An Israeli court found in their favour. Justine and Nadia were fined thousands of dollars.
It was very frightening, actually. We had, someone showed up to my house and, to serve me. I couldn't quite believe it was happening.
After refusing to pay the $12,000 fine, Justine and Nadia ran a crowdfunding campaign and donated over $40,000 to the Gaza Mental Health Foundation.
It kind of shows you how at odds a lot of Israeli society is with our values. I mean, we have freedom of speech in this country. The idea that you could be sued for a opinion piece in the spin-off is just seems almost laughable, right? But it happened.
Many are angry about what's happening in Gaza. Jewish people in Israel, the United States, including here in Aotearoa, are feeling the heat.
I'm not here to pretend that there hasn't been an increase in anti-Semitism, because there absolutely has. And the reason, and I think that Israel's advocates have some responsibility to bear for that. I think they have endangered us to protect Israel and to protect Israel from criticism. But I mean, I guess the other half of that question is the challenges. It's kind of living by my Jewish values. The challenge is that I was taught tzedek tirdof, which means justice, justice you shall pursue. There's another concept called tikkun olam, repairing the world, the obligation to be basically a fighter for social justice. These are things that were instilled in me, and I feel that I am living by those values. And I have whiplash watching the silence and complicity of many in my community around what's happening now in Israel. And I think a line has been crossed, and I don't think you can come back from that.
Coming up, a voice from what's known as the Palestinian diaspora, those who were forced to leave but still hope to return one day. Kia ora. Like the Jewish community, the Palestinian community is just as diverse. Although there's a united sense of purpose around the kaupapa, not everyone holds the same religious beliefs. I spoke with Auckland-based Palestinian Rand Hazu, a theatre practitioner and academic.
I'm a Palestinian Christian from Jerusalem. I have nothing to do with Hamas. And I'm suspicious of an organisation as well that for years has been funded by the Israeli government themselves. So I'm not particularly interested in supporting that kaupapa. What I'm about is looking at things like the Amnesty International report that clearly sets out a very strong case for why Israel is an apartheid state. And just like here in this country, in Aotearoa, we supported the anti-apartheid struggle against South Africa. That's how I see my role, is to look at the rights disparities between Israeli Jews and between Palestinian Arabs, and to think, what is my role here? How can I solve that?
Let's just touch on Hamas, because that's very much part of the discourse here.
Yeah.
So we hear that the Hamas manifesto includes the destruction of the state of Israel. Is that your understanding, and is that the understanding of Palestinians?
Look, if Israel is a settler colonial state, then most people, I think, most people of conscience anywhere in the world should be thinking about how we dismantle that aspect of a state, right? It's instigated an apartheid regime that's documented by Amnesty International and other rights groups through decades of evidence that Israel is a settler colonial apartheid regime, okay? And we should, people of all conscience anywhere around the world, should be thinking, how do we dismantle that, right? That doesn't mean that I'm anti-Jewish. That doesn't mean that I don't want to work with Israelis as well. But if it means supporting a state that enforces a system where Jews and Zionists and Israelis are giving rights at the
expense
of Palestinians, we can't agree to that.
Israel rejects any suggestion that it's racist or meets the international definition of apartheid. So did the US House of Representatives.
House passed a resolution declaring that Congress does not believe Israel is a racist or apartheid state by a vote of 217 to 9.
Let me be clear. Israel's not a racist country.
What's your understanding around the level of support for Hamas?
Well, I think they keep getting more and more popular. The more Israel interferes, the more killings there are, because they're seen as the only, really they're seen as the only legitimate opposition at the moment, or the only legitimate party or that is trying to advance the rights of Palestinians. So Hamas has kind of grown from strength to strength. They provide a lot of social programs for the people, a lot of education, a lot of mosques, a lot of, support, welfare. And they're seen as the only credible kind of outfit that has been criticizing this Israeli settler colonial regime.
Hamas is a broad church, I guess.
Yes.
There's the health authorities, there's the governing, but then there's a military wing. Is that correct?
I believe so, yeah. There's several, I think there's several groups, but yeah, there is a military kind of wing of Hamas as well.
Mm.
The political wing was just designated by our government as being a terrorist organization as well, which is something that we didn't do in the past under other governments. We had never designated, this is a new designation that the New Zealand government brought in.
Genocide is a term that is really fraught in Western discussions, and South Africa took Israel to the ICJ with accusations around genocide. Do you believe genocide is taking place?
Yes, I do. So the Genocide Convention clearly states that actions imposed by a state to bring about the destruction of a group, ethnic, religious, otherwise, through various means constitutes genocide. But I think what worries the West is that, it can't be this nation called Israel that we support that, has got this amazing publicity and marketing campaign that keeps telling everyone in the world we're the only democracy in the Middle East, right? It can't be our close ally Israel.
Like so many other Palestinians, Rand is part of a huge international diaspora. Born and raised in Jordan, he's visited Palestine and is frustrated that these are the images we generally get to see of Palestinians.
On the ground, there's 99% of Palestinians never picked up a gun in their life. Instead, they pursue studies, instead they create theater, instead of they create music. And so those are the kind of things that connect with me and that I remember the most, yeah.
Rand's passion is theatre. While he lives in Aotearoa, he identifies with the homeland his people fled from and dream of returning to one day.
70% of people that live in Gaza are refugees. They're refugees from inside Israel. They have to go back. The right of return is a right that's enshrined in international law. It's a right that Palestinians hold particularly firm to. Refugees that have fled their homes and want to be able to return and live at peace with their neighbors should be allowed to. And that's what we need to solve. We have to end the occupation. We have to allow people that want to return to their homes to return and to live at peace. Otherwise, we're just going to have these cycles of violence again and again and again.
Last week, the US and 17 other countries demanded that Hamas release the remaining hostages. Hamas said they were open to any ideas or proposals that take into account the needs and rights of their people, but criticised the statement over not calling for a permanent ceasefire and the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. There's also the ongoing issue of Israel detaining Palestinians, often indefinitely without charge, reportedly more than 3,400 people, including children.
Can you just tell me a little bit about that sort of situation of Palestinians being detained in Israel?
This is the experience for Palestinians. They've experienced this since the inception of the State of Israel, right? And so we have this kind of weird situation where we feel for the Israeli families who are now, outside saying, bring them home, bring the hostages home. What we're saying is, yes, bring all the hostages home, right? Even when Palestinian prisoners die in prison, the Israeli authorities hold on to their bodies. So that's the kind of situation as a kind of context for why Hamas sees it as a legitimate strategy to go in and kidnap people, which is a war crime, but they do it because of all the Palestinian prisoners that are kept by Israel that the world just doesn't seem to bat an eyelid. When everyday New Zealanders ask me what they can do, and they ask it with that particular kind of apathy of like, it's so complex. I get frustrated because I don't think it's complex. I think it's very simple, right? Israel is a settler colonial project that is occupying Palestinian land, that is building illegal settlements, and that is subjugating the Palestinian people and denying them their rights, okay? And for me, the solution is very simple, because I adhere to the call for boycotts, divestments, and sanctions that the majority of Palestinian civil society has asked for. And that is a tool that's a rights-based approach based on the South African experience to apply pressure on Israel to abide by international law. Palestinians are not asking for special treatment. We're not saying we're different from anyone. We just want the basic rights and dignity afforded to anyone else. That's all we're asking for.
We're now more than 200 days in. Israel is threatening a full-scale assault on the city of Rafah, sheltering 1 million+ refugees. What's going to happen to those people and where are they meant to go? Our guests, Winston Peters, and many others are adamant that a ceasefire must lead to an enduring solution, one that acknowledges the human rights, the civil rights, and the tino rangatiratanga of the Palestinian people. Pō Marie.